Hi there, I'm Rex King. Welcome back to another episode of From the Archive. In the 1950s, horror as we know it really didn't exist for the most part. As for most of the 1950s, it was traditionally science fiction horror, some giant monster movies, and some Ray Harryhausen stuff. Nothing that was really considered what we would consider a true horror film nowadays. And that would remain true until 1957 with the release of The Curse of Frankenstein. As I said, traditional horror really didn't exist in the 1950s. But Hammer Studios, who would become known for horror films during this time period, decided to release a bunch of movies that were basically remakes of the Universal monster movies. Of course, they couldn't use anything that Universal had invented for those monster movies, but they still had enough to go on, and the first one they did was The Curse of Frankenstein, directed by Terence Fisher and written by Jimmy Sangster, both of which would become Hammer regulars, and starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee on their first on-screen pairing together, which would become a legendary pairing throughout Hammer's horror run, and they would work together on several films and become really well known as icons. The Curse of Frankenstein was released in 1957 on a budget of about $270,000. It made about $8 million, being hugely financially successful for Hammer. However, critics at the time thought the film was too gory and not true cinema, quote unquote. They were proven wrong, as this film became a cult classic, and many people were inspired by this movie. Is this film truly worthy of the name cult classic? Well, let's talk about it. So, The Curse of Frankenstein is a little bit interesting as far as the story is concerned. So, the story here follows Dr. Frankenstein, and it starts with him as a young age, and he basically meets this tutor named Paul, who he himself hired. Paul is played by Robert Urquhart in the film, and pretty much they start a friendship that lasts for several years. In fact, Paul helps Frankenstein on several of his experiments. However, after successfully bringing a dog back to life, Frankenstein decides he wants to go to the next level, creating their own man. And at first, Paul goes along with this, until Frankenstein's cousin-wife, no, I'm not joking, shows up at the castle, and Paul is horrified to learn that she will be staying there. So he tries to convince Frankenstein to give up this idea and this experiment, but Frankenstein will not be perturbed and will go to any lengths necessary to complete his experiment. So The Curse of Frankenstein focuses on something that a lot of other Frankenstein adaptations don't focus on: the creation of the monster. We follow Baron Frankenstein as he continues to get parts for his creature and continues to build it. In fact, we don't get to really see the full realized creature until well beyond the halfway point. So the film really focuses on the philosophical debate between Frankenstein and Paul, and basically their dynamic. And I really like that. It's a different idea to follow Frankenstein as he creates his creature. We don't really get to see a lot of that in Frankenstein adaptations. In the 1930 adaptation, we got to see a little bit with him getting the brain and the initial body to work off. But we never really get to see him start putting the pieces together. This is more focused on that and the grotesque imagery that this film could get in the 1950s. And like I said, I really appreciate that dynamic. Now, this also works because of what they did with Frankenstein. They made him more of a cold-hearted, unsympathetic man who just will go to any lengths to get what he wants. and doesn't care who gets in his way. Most adaptations of Frankenstein really depict him as kind of a sympathetic character, someone we kind of want to root for, even though he's pushed the boundaries of nature. This one, you do not want to root for him. He is clearly evil, and he is definitely someone who will go to any lengths necessary to get to his end goal. I also like the character of Paul. This type of character can very easily be one note, but they managed to actually add a decent amount to him. Also, he doesn't start off immediately hating the idea of the experiment. He only hates the idea when, well, the cousin shows up and he doesn't want her to be hurt by the experiments at all and believes that she just should not be there, but no one will listen to him. And I also really like that he does come to understand how horrible of an idea this is, and is trying to tell Frankenstein that this will only lead to tragedy. But Frankenstein, in his hubris, just will not listen. I also really like the creature here. They don't refer to him as anything else other than the creature in this film, and I really do like that he's just more of a physical force. That he's not really a character. He's more of a prop almost. But I kind of like this idea of the monster because, in my opinion, a lot of Frankenstein adaptations focus too much on the monster and don't focus on, who the main character of Frankenstein is. Frankenstein. Luckily, I feel like this film manages to realize that and focuses on Baron Frankenstein and basically his horrible goal. Now, the performances are really what make this film work, as Christopher Lee does a brilliant physical job as the creature and manages to convey the menace without a single drop of dialogue. Robert Urquhart as Paul is also quite good, and Hazel Court's always a welcome addition to any Hammer horror film. But honestly, the standout here is Peter Cushing. What he managed to do with Baron Frankenstein without overacting is really quite a feat. I hung on every word that came out of his mouth. And that's not just because he has the best lines, he has the best line delivery in the film. And I really enjoyed him overall in this movie. The visuals are quite good as well, for the most part. There are some scenes, like towards the beginning, where we see a wide shot and there's clearly a matte painting in the background that is kind of noticeable. But I really think the gore effects do age well. Yes, they're not as dynamic as we would have nowadays, but we're talking about a film from 1957. You gotta take what you can get, and I do believe we get some brilliant gore effects here. To top it all off, what they managed to do with the set that they had, which was really just a house, is really brilliant. They really made every room of that house work to absolute perfection. The lighting is brilliant, the costume work is spot on, and the makeup effects for the creature that makes him look like a corpse just stitched together is also brilliant. The music done by James Bernard complements all these facts, well, amazingly. I really enjoy The Curse of Frankenstein, and it's a worthy addition to any collection without even talking about the special features. But, of course, I'm going to talk about the special features because, well, that's the entire point of the show. So, the special features on this one include a commentary with a bunch of film historians. As you know on this show at this point, I don't watch the commentaries of film historians because I don't find film historians all that interesting to listen to sometimes when it comes to full-on commentaries. But there are several making-of featurettes that go over the history of the film and how it came to be, including one that just goes over the pre-production and what went into the idea of Hammer finally making this movie. Basically the entire discussion of Gothic literature and Gothic horror in general. It goes over the lighting of the film and how they managed to use the set, and they follow they also talk about James Bernard's brilliant score in the movie and what he managed to do with Hammer overall. So yeah, this is definitely a worthy addition to any collector's collection. I highly recommend this Blu-ray. I absolutely enjoy it. I really enjoyed the film. I love the special features. I cannot say enough good things about this. It's truly a wonderful film. Anyway, next time we take a look at the private lives of Elizabeth and Essex. See you then.